my turn. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes. Hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. Hope y'all are coming off of an incredible weekend. I'm still battling my allergies, so if I sound nasally, a little funky, just keep it moving. Don't pay attention to that. Just listen to the message that I'm giving you. And man, I'm really excited about this one. I think I say that probably for every single episode, but this is actually something I wrote about on my blog recently, the first ever blog post that I put up, Dramos.com, if you want to check that out. But it was inspired by this book that I've been reading, Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, which is someone that I've mentioned a bunch on this podcast before. But this particular book has really just been kind of tapping into, I feel like, a point that I'm at in my life right now where I'm sort of transitioning out of this old version of myself, this very like frontward facing, kind of, man, I mean, let's be honest, around people like the Breakfast Club, and being constantly around everything that happens in that world of celebrity and the access that you get and all of the above, right? And I'm kind of moving into what I feel like is a far more elevated version of myself. But with that, you don't get the same instant gratification that you do when it comes to kind of living in this world where people are constantly looking to, pat you on the back and boost your ego and kiss up to you to get something. You don't get those quick ego boosts. And I know that internally my own personal ego has kind of been screaming out for attention in different ways. And I've kind of been really trying to dial into, how to kind of make peace with this part of myself that is kind of constantly playing this game of tug of war of trying to pull me back into kind of my old life to a little bit, And I want to kind of dive into all that I've been feeling. But what I specifically want to focus on when it comes to this book and the idea of ego is the idea of actually doing something versus just being somebody. And I'll break down kind of what that means as we get a little bit more into the show. But we often kind of have to make a decision, in our lives as far as what we find to be more important. And that's what I want to talk about in today's show. So we'll do a deep dive into what the hell all of that means in our For the People in the Back section. I'll do a bit of a deeper talk as far as what I've kind of been going through as of late, or maybe over the course of the last year or so in our Mi Gente segment. I'll get y'all to chime in our Ask a Gringo segment. Of course, we'll get into everything as we always do. But right now, let's kind of do this deep dive into this idea of doing something versus being somebody. And we'll do that in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the Say it louder for the people in the back.
Now, to put it shortly, in the book, Ryan Holiday phrases it as to be or to do, right? And he brings up this story from this general in the U.S. who's responsible for some of the military technology that we have currently, but doesn't get his name talked about quite as much or even at all for the most part in comparison to other U.S. sort of military figures or leaders that we kind of famously know. And he was actually a colonel, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he was a general. And to be honest, I'm kind of ignorant to the ranks, so one might be higher than the other. I'm not positive of it. Tell me if I fucked that up. But the colonel's name is John Boyd. I'm gonna be referring back to this one chapter in Ego is the Enemy, the book by Ron Holiday, and the chapter is called To Be or To Do. And kind of to summarize what this whole thing is about. The colonel trains different pilots and different army figures, and tells them that at one point in their life they're going to be faced with a cross in the road, right? And they have to pick which path they go down. And one of those paths, he says, is you have to choose either, do you want to be somebody or do you want to do something? And he talks about in the path that if you choose the path of wanting to be somebody, you're going to have to give up and sacrifice a lot of things. You're probably going to have to give up and sacrifice many of your personal relationships, your free time, your personal life in general. But you will be somebody, right? You might be a household name. You might be famous in some sort of way in the circle that you choose to operate in. But he says, or you have the choice to do something. And in this one, your name may not be spoken about. Your face may not be instantaneously recognizable by the general public or by anyone for that matter. But you have the ability to enact actual change that has long-standing effects. You have the ability to actually create something that truly matters. And you have to make that choice. And when I tell you I highlighted so many fucking passages and like phrases from this chapter, it's ridiculous. But I'm just going to kind of read a few random ones that I pulled from here. But he says, having authority is not the same as being an authority. He says, impressing people is utterly different from being truly impressive, right? So you have to differentiate things. There are a lot of people who are famous, but aren't necessarily great at what they do. Don't actually do anything that will leave us talking about them long after they're gone, right? They're just famous and people know who they are for the moment, but they haven't really actually contributed much to this world in comparison to the fame that they have, right? Clinton Sparks actually has a really good quote of this, and he says, being famous doesn't make you great, but being great may make you famous. And really, I think at the sort of crux of it all, what we're trying to get at here is the idea of doing something that actually matters, like something that really, really matters, you know? Like, what do you value more? Do you value being a part of work and contributing to the world in a way that truly is of value, truly means something? Or do you just want to kind of enjoy the fruits of notoriety and possibly fame just for the sake of having them, but never actually making a real contribution? And in this chapter, I mean, he goes on to different examples of things, but, you know, one of the things that kind of resonated with me working in the entertainment industry is he talks about this idea that maybe even some people have the greatest of intentions of enacting real change and you know, working their way up to the top to really enact change. But what often happens is the deeper and further you go into, you know, that world that you're in, whatever it might be, you know, for me it was the entertainment industry, and the further up the ranks you go, the more of yourself you sort of have to give up in order to kind of climb this ladder, right? To get into this sort of boys club, so to speak, to get into the inner circles of this industry and be able to rub shoulders with the power players of this industry, right? And within that means doing favors for people, interacting with people that you don't deem to have a strong character, not people that you necessarily want to have around you, but you have no choice if you want to kind of climb that ladder, right? And we see it in corporate jobs and all various forms of life, right? It's not just for the entertainment industry. And also as you and also as a human being, what tends to happen, and I've been guilty of this as well, is as you begin to kind of climb that ladder, you know, little by little, you begin to kind of lose sight of yourself a little bit. You begin to lose sight of what's actually important, right? Like Ryan has a quote in the book where he says, this is what the ego does. It crosses out what matters and replaces it with what doesn't. And I've talked about this a bunch in the podcast about having something that is bigger than yourself, right? Valuing something that is far larger than, you know, your own ego, your own successes. But I think, you know, to me, when I read this chapter, what was standing out to me was just kind of like this idea of like, man, so many of us, myself included at one point in time, were wasting so much time and giving people so much of ourselves for things that really at the end of the day don't matter at all, you know? And it starts out small. It starts out with, you know, maybe a fake laugh at one of your boss's terrible jokes, you know, but it becomes bigger and bigger than that, you know, when you're asked to do things you don't believe in. You know, you have to stay quiet during moments of things happening that you know are wrong, you know, because the reality is most people who end up speaking out hit a ceiling at that point, right? Then you end up not being able to climb the ladder anymore because the person above you doesn't want somebody who goes against them, doesn't want somebody that goes against the system. And those who tend to be able to continue to climb up it don't actually end up doing anything of real substance, or it ends up being far less than what they originally had hoped. I mean, you think about somebody like, man, even President Obama, right? I remember hearing his conversation with the Breakfast Club and talking about, how he kind of had to play the game, that he couldn't do all for Black America that he wanted to do. He couldn't be as radical as he wanted to do because he had to play the game. And listen, I mean, not at the end of the day, he's made some great contributions, but he had to give up a part of himself. He had to dull a part of what he truly believed in to play the game at that high of a level. And sure, he got to become president and he got to have this certain point of influence, but he also still had to give up much of what he believed in and sort of stay quiet when he knew things weren't being done as they should have. When he knew that people were standing in the way of progress, he had to stay quiet or else he would lose all of his power that he possibly could have. He had to play the game. And I think there's a balancing act to all of this, but I just think that oftentimes if you are a highly driven person, it's easy to get focused on getting to the top and getting that sort of credential, be it a job title, a pay weight, a certain salary, whatever it might be. And it's easy to start losing sight of yourself and what really matters in that pursuit. And to kind of bring it full circle back to the colonel that I mentioned at the start, he didn't want to play that political game to rise to the top and become a household name. But what he did do was consult and help engineer modern technology that fighter planes today are using and utilizing in our military. He helped train our members of our military and our active service. Like, his legacy lives on forever, even if you're not calling it out by name. And that's what I've been more obsessed with as of late, is creating things that will live on far beyond my time here on this earth. I think too many of us are concerned, and myself included, with the instant gratification. But what ends up happening is we're just creating essentially like fast food content, right? And I use the word content loosely, depending on whatever it is that you choose to do for a living. But if you look at our culture, it's very much so fast food, right? Fast food TV, fast food content, fast food everything, right? Everything is like quick, like music. We consume it, digest it, and get over it very quickly. Same thing with any sort of entertainment or media. Same thing with technology. It's all moving so quickly. It's all just fast food rather than being like truly revolutionary ideas and creations that will stand the test of time. We no longer place value on quality. It's more so about that quick fix. I mean, shit, if you want to see a sort of picture of our modern day culture, look at, the most popular app, TikTok, right now, right? Like, it's literally, how can I make the quickest bite-sized content that will keep people just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, right? I'm not creating something that they're going to want to remember and rewatch over and over again. I'm giving them that quick fix and they can move on to the next quick fix. And it's just this real kind of cyclical thing of like, consume, digest, move on, consume, digest, move on. And I think all of this kind of leaves as like a harsh reminder of why so many of us feel unfulfilled in our everyday lives, because our culture is not one that is meant to provide nourishment or fulfillment, right? It's not meant to provide, us meant to provide presence. It's not meant for us to be present to what's going on and enjoy the present moment. It's always just this quick moving thing. Move on to the next thing. Move on to the next thing. And again, that diminishes quality both for what we're ingesting as well as our quality of life. I think at the end of the day begins to diminish because we're not actually taking in anything of substance, nor are we being rewarded for creating or working on anything of substance. And I kind of want to get into, I think, a bit of what I've been kind of feeling, but to kind of preface it, I think back to a lot of my time over the last 4 years or so, if not longer. I think a lot of that lack of fulfillment was because I wasn't really doing anything that meant anything. I wasn't really doing anything that truly meant something, right? I can convince myself that, as a DJ, I'm providing people this amazing break from their everyday life, the Friday and Saturday night that they have in the club to just let loose. And to a degree, I think that's true. But in the back of my mind, I think I knew that at the end of the day, it really doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of it all. And I think that when you talk about why, I never was really happy in those moments or always felt like something was missing, I think a lot of it does pertain to having a lack of real meaning in my life. But with that said, the fucking ego, man, your ego will still try and drag you back in and convince you that this is the thing that you need. This is the thing that will make you feel good. And that's why this book, Ego is the Enemy, is titled that. You have to find ways to combat your ego from taking you into situations that are lesser than, lesser than when it comes to your moral standard of living, but also things that just generally don't actually make you happy at the end of the day. So with that said, I want to get into kind of a bit of my story of how I've kind of come to a bit of how this idea has really begun to stand out to me. It's something that I've been kind of pondering over as of late in my life. All right, so I talked about this in the blog that I wrote, and you can kind of hear it a little bit more in full. I'm going to kind of generalize a bit of what I was talking about. You can hear it in full at dramos.com. But I think for me, and it's probably this time period of year that's coming up right now, I think I've felt it over the last year or so, but definitely right now in March, it was, something that traditionally, historically has been like a big point of my life for the past, I don't even know, 6-7 years. But, I'll get to that. But I think overall, since leaving the Breakfast Club, and we're going on a year now this summer, I've realized that a lot of kind of what I do and my successes are a bit in the shadows, right? Like, full disclosure, financially, I'm in a better place than I've ever been. Work-wise, I am doing work that means so much more to me, than anything I've ever worked on before. Time-wise, I have the freedom that I've always been looking for, the flexibility that I've always been looking for. And I really have this amazing, amazing life. But what I've also begun to kind of notice is that the things that I'm doing right now don't have that sort of sexy kind of, encasement that my previous work did, right? Like, even if I had, let's say, $1 to my name or was living paycheck to paycheck like I was at certain points with the Breakfast Club, I still was the guy at the Breakfast Club, right? Like, people were still excited that I worked at the Breakfast Club, that I was the guy in the background of interviews with celebrities and all this, that, and the third. People still wanted to kiss my ass. People still wanted to invite me to events and all everything that comes along with that, right? I had some sort of industry cachet that, I was constantly reminded of and that I constantly got some sort of pat on the back that boosted my ego, right? And now in the world that I exist in, I don't have those constant reminders on a regular basis. Like the world of podcasting is incredible. I love it, but it's not as sexy as hanging out with celebrities and partying in clubs and things like that, right? It's not as sexy as DJing and playing out in the clubs and like being a part of this whole nightlife scene and, fucking popping bottles and not have to pay for anything because, people just want you to come and hang out and check out what it is that they're doing. Everything that comes along with this idea of being, in close proximity to celebrities. And I think my ego has been trying to convince me that I'm not as successful as maybe I previously was because I don't have those things anymore. I don't live a life like that anymore. And it's this constant tug of war where my ego is trying to pull me back into a lot of those lifestyle choices, is telling me that I need to be out there. I need to be seen. I need to be going to these events. I need to be doing these in-person celebrity interviews. I need to be back in the club DJing and all of these different things, and it's telling me that I should be jealous of this person on Instagram who's doing these things, even though in the back of my mind, I know it literally is just for clout. Like, you're not getting paid for it. You're not doing anything. Or I know that I'm, doing far bigger things that are producing far bigger results in the grand scheme of things. But my ego is still trying to convince me that I need to do those, that I need to go back to this life. Right. And it's this constant kind of battle, and I now even find myself waiting on emails just to give myself that boost. Waiting on a good news email. Oh yeah, this project's going to come along for you now. This check's coming now, blah, blah, blah. Right. Waiting on that just so I can give myself that little instant hit of dopamine and my ego can get that pat on the back that it's looking for. And I mentioned this time of year in March because obviously, during the pandemic, this hadn't happened. But pre-pandemic, I used to go to Miami for about a week every year. in March, they have this huge like music conference, Miami Music Week, and everybody's down there. And it would be like, this very much kind of low budget celebrity type of lifestyle, through connections. We'd get guests listed for all these huge parties and these huge events and open bars. And, people are buying you drinks if it's not an open bar. And like you're hanging out at the DJ booth of these giant clubs, you're in fucking Miami. Like all the fake kind of glitz and glam that goes along with that. And it's happening this week. And I'm seeing on Instagram, people that I know going down there. I'm seeing DJs that I know posting their flyers for their shows that they're having down there. And even though in the back of my mind, I've done all of that. I've played those shows, and I know that for the most part, there's 5 people at that event and you're just DJing to an empty room just for the sake of being able to say that you DJ'd in Miami, right? Just so you can post that flyer of being in Miami, and everybody who's not there thinks that it's so much bigger than it actually is. But even knowing that, my fucking ego is still telling me like, yo, look, this person got a one-up on you. You didn't even get a phone call this year to go do that gig. Like, you've fallen off. And even knowing again in the back of my head that all that means nothing. All that means, wasting a couple $1,000s to go to Miami for a week just to hang around and drink, essentially, right? Like, with people to hang around and drink, with people literally who are from the same area as me that I can hang out with any other day, but instead it's just in Miami doing the same shit, right? But I'm still having a bit of that back and forth, and I bring all of that up to kind of say, like, it's really intoxicating to live a life where you, quote unquote, are somebody, where you're choosing to try and be somebody, right? Because that gives you the instant gratification. You're able to really feel like you're fucking killing it, even if you're living paycheck to paycheck. Again, that's who I was for a long time. All those trips I was doing to Miami, I had to save up the entire year just to afford to do that. And I still had to budget every single day, my food, my drinks, and everything else, because I didn't have it like that. But, people thought I did because I was on the radio, or I was, hanging out with people who were, super well connected, or who did actually have money, and I was able to, by proxy, feel like I was this success, and my ego was fucking at an all-time high, able to enjoy all of those moments. But the reality is, when it was all said and done, it meant nothing, right? Like, all those moments that I convinced myself truly meant something, all the time that I put into saving to take those trips, all the energy that I put into going out there to, quote unquote, network with people, and to base my year around this 1 week, I can genuinely look back and be like, for the most part, it meant nothing aside from the fun moments and memories that I had with, my close friends at the time. Like, those were absolutely great, but I could have done that with them anywhere, and at the end of the day, I'm not missing anything by not being a part of that anymore. And I think as humans, we have to kind of sometimes remind ourselves of what is truly important. It's really easy to kind of get lost in the sauce, get lost in the flow of life. And this doesn't just have to be with like, experiences that you're having, or trying to be a celebrity. I mean, shit, it could be with material items, right? Like, I talk about this all the time, wasting money on material goods just to make yourself feel good temporarily in the eyes of other people that are around you, right? And how many times have you bought something that you couldn't really afford, only to really wish that you had that money back in it when a certain circumstance happened, right? Or when something else that you really would have wanted comes up and now you're short because you wasted your money on that one quick fix, Like, it's much harder to actually do anything of substance, but it's incredibly necessary, because that, at the end of the day, is where the true happiness and the true fulfillment comes from. And it's not going to be instant, you're not going to get that quick fix, and you might even have to remind yourself, to get that quick fix. That's why something like gratitude is so important, because you have to sit there and remind yourself, wow, I'm so grateful for this, It's funny to me how, as human beings, the things that actually matter are the hardest ones to appreciate, And I think for me, even though I live by this saying of, at the end of the day, when my time is done here, I want to be able to say that I left this world at least just a slightly better place than it was when I got here. It's still easy to get lost in moments and completely forget that. And I think for me, and I think the big reason I bring this up and why I think it's so profound, and I want people to really be keen to it and be aware of it is that I genuinely believe there is a way for us to live on forever, but it comes not in the physical sense. It comes from our work, right? Think about your favorite pieces of work, be it a movie, with your favorite actor who's no longer with us, your favorite musician who's no longer with us, your favorite author. I mean, how many books from dead people do we all read till this day that we're getting something from, that are still taught in schools, right? How much artwork are we still appreciating? Andy Warhol is still getting documentaries made about him. And it's because he actually created something. They actually created something that truly mattered. They created a piece of work that rocked the world, that changed people's perspective, that actually impacted people in a profound way. And obviously, like, none of these people we're talking about are perfect. They all have moments that, maybe they were trying to be somebody. Maybe they lost their way. But I think at the end of the day, if you look at it from a whole, they were more interested in actually doing something as opposed to being someone. I look at somebody like Nipsey Hussle, right? His story has resonated with me because Nipsey took the stairs, right? He didn't take the elevator. He took the stairs, and he could have taken the elevator. He chose to be independent and build himself up before signing a deal. And when he signed that deal, he wanted to be a business partnership, a joint venture 50-50. And this meant he actually was more interested in creating something that mattered, something that could possibly live on forever through him and then also his family financially for generations to come, right? The fact that he got to own his music because he decided to be patient and wait till the labels were desperate enough to want to sign him that they would give into that. And like, I'm reading this book on Nipsey right now, but you realize his journey was so fucking long. Like, he didn't find real success till his 30s, And it was because he was building it brick by brick, right? But what did he end up doing? He ended up creating this whole movement that inspired people like myself to continue on his legacy in some sort of way. And anybody that I inspire is a part of, and anybody that I end up inspiring is also byproduct, whether they realize it or not, going to be inspired by him. And it continues on and on after that, right? Nipsey was building something. He wanted to empower his community. He was more focused with ownership, and it ended up being that he ended up owning that entire shopping center that he used to hustle at. And he was able to employ people from his community. He was able to rent his storefronts out to local businesses from the community. And sadly, and if he was still here with us, that would have only grown, But he took the hard way in order to build something, in order to do something, right? He was more concerned with actually doing something that mattered rather than just being somebody, rather than just being a celebrity. Now, of course, the celebrity came because of his greatness and all that he was accomplishing, but that wasn't the main focus. And I think that's what I'm getting at. I'm not saying that everybody who's famous is doing, frivolous work that really doesn't matter. What I'm saying is they didn't focus on the fame and attention as their main goal. They focused on actually creating something of substance and actually being great in whatever space they existed in. And that's the difference. Greatness was at the forefront. Originality was at the forefront. Bringing their vision to life in the way that they saw it was at the forefront. And because of that vision that they had and trying to bring it to us in the least watered down way possible, we are all better for it as a result. Like, if I look at my story, if I wouldn't have had this commitment to actually doing something of substance, I would have just been another random radio jock somewhere in the country that you would have easily forgotten once they replaced, right? Like that maybe would have gotten laid off during the pandemic and you wouldn't even have noticed. They would have just introduced somebody who would have thought for a week, oh, that's weird, Dramos isn't on there. And you would have forgotten who Dramos was. Like, there's so many radio jocks from my childhood that like were interchanged and I had no idea up until I got into radio and started really knowing the actual history behind the scenes. But instead, I rebelled against the system. It took forever for me to find any sort of success as a result. But now, potentially, hopefully, I am creating something that could inspire people in a way that lives on forever. And at the very least, I'm bringing you a version of myself that is truly authentic and not watered down to try and fit into somebody else's box. I am bringing you something that I believe truly matters. And as I say that, I feel a bit of the weight coming off of my shoulders because I'm realizing why I do things the way that I do them. Because I'm giving myself the opportunity to really create something that is truly honest and truly matters at the end of the day. Like, yeah, maybe taking them stairs every day is a bit exhausting, but you can count on the fact that you're going to be in a lot better shape than somebody else who's been just taking the elevator their entire life. Your body's going to feel a lot better. Your health is going to feel a lot better. And as a result, your life is going to be slightly better than it would have been had you have just been that elevator rider. Now, it's a bit of an analogy. It's also a bit literal, but I think you get what I mean. Now, with that said, I want to hear from y'all in our Ask a Gringo segment. But first, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Ask a Gringo.
I have a question.
Now, for this week's Ask a Gringo segment and at DJ Dramos on Instagram, if you want to be a part of these conversations, I do it for each and every episode. I wanted to talk on this episode and get y'all's perspective when we're talking about the idea of legacy and creating something that actually matters. And I want y'all to look at life through the lens of what actually matters. So I asked, do you want to be remembered for when you're gone? And I'll go through a few that we got. I got a bunch of different responses on this, but at Roralegos, at Roralegos says, someone who made other people feel loved. And I think that's such a beautiful way to kind of start this conversation as far as getting y'all's responses go, because I also feel like people think that the thing that I'm talking about when it comes to things that actually matter, they think it requires this like grandiose gesture, this crazy sort of idea that is like just out of reach for the everyday person. And it's not. Even just being a good person, somebody who shows love and compassion to others goes a long way. It's like the butterfly effect, man. Like you have an interaction with your Amazon, delivery driver, and it's just a pleasant one. You give them a bottle of water, maybe a snack, and you just like, tell them you appreciate, all they're doing, especially as it starts getting hotter over here on the East Coast. And you're, recognizing the hard work that they're doing to like be able to bring you a fucking package the day after you order it, which just still sounds crazy to me. But like, that little effort, as minute as it seems, and as again little effort as it really takes you to do, like might just make that person's day that much better. They might go home and like be a better father to their child, and that child like feeling loved by their father that day, like is inspired to like really tap into their own passion. That person goes on to do this and do that, right? It's this crazy butterfly effect. It's like Tupac, I'm paraphrasing this quote, but talks about like, he might not be the one to change the world, but he could be the spark that lights, but he could be the spark for the next person who actually ends up changing the world, right? And many people believe that Nipsey was that spark, right? There's been kind of like this idea of hypothetically Nipsey being the spark that Tupac inspired. And you think about it, Nipsey has changed the world because at the very least, I look at my own self and I'm so inspired by his work and the way that he moves in this world that I've now applied it to my own life, and if I inspire one other person because of that, again, that legacy continues on forever. So it's just little things like that, man. I really do believe that nothing exists in a vacuum, and it's this kind of and this world is really just this butterfly effect, this sort of these dominoes that you knock over one and the rest continue to fall. And we can do that in a positive way, or you could do that in a negative way, right? There are always negative sides to that as well. So you choose, if you want to lead with love, you're spreading more love out into this world. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And let's see, I got from at Nicolosa_Vega says, I want people to remember me for making them laugh and raising good, empathetic humans that are doing great things. And I fucking love this as well because, again, when I talk about you don't have to be some superhero, you don't have to be some celebrity to enact change. You could be a parent and be a good parent. Like how many of the world's tragedies could have been avoided if the person that committed them was just loved while they were growing up. I did that retreat, the Hoffman process, where they believe so many things of so many patterns you have in your life, good and bad, are attributed to your upbringing from your parents, right? So how many, mass murderers, how many violent acts that we've seen, shit, look at Putin right now. Like what if somebody actually loved those people? There's a chance that they wouldn't be committing the heinous acts that we have seen. So being a parent, as simple as that might sound to many people, you are a superhero. You do have the ability to essentially change the world, or you still have the ability to leave your mark on the world through the human beings that you are raising. If you are raising kids that feel loved and want to share love and want to share their gifts with the world, That is such an amazing, amazing thing to do. And you are then choosing to actually do something, right? It's the parents that choose to neglect their kids, for their own, who choose to, do whatever they want at the expense of their own kids, who choose to, instead of spending time with their kids, choose to ignore them to go live on some sort of childish fantasy of being out in the clubs or wasting money on this when they could be buying their kids that. All of that's choosing to be somebody rather than actually being a great parent for your kid, understanding the ripple effects that it could have on this world if you just sat down and chose to do something in the form of being a great parent. So I absolutely love that one right there. And let's see, we'll read one more. At Arrow B. Samuel says, as the hood's hero. And I love that. I love that as well. I mean, I think that takes us back to this idea of Nipsey, right? You're showing people in areas where they see nothing but lack, right? They are disenfranchised and thinking that there's no way out of this. And unfortunately, what areas like that, when you talk about the hood, people become easy prey for doing things that just bring them that quick and easy fix, be it illegal activity or be it just not being responsible enough to think about the long-term effect of their decisions. And being an example of somebody who can come from that same area, come from those same dire circumstances and find a way out and to live a life of fulfillment and abundance is huge. And to want to give it back and to make sure you're telling that story to other kids from that same area and making sure that you're somebody that they could look up to is huge. And you don't know the ripple effect that could have and the change that could enact on the world. Again, just such a beautiful and profound thing that I encourage all of us to kind of think about and look at as we go on to live our everyday lives. Now, with that said, man, let's kind of tie these ideas together in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
And I think at the end of the day, to put it in practical terms, look at, let's say, a music artist, right? Like, generally speaking, the artists who are the one-hit wonders, who are like, come and go so quickly, we forget who they are. They're the ones who are kind of just tapping into a trend, tapping into a moment, not trying to, reinvent the wheel, but instead just trying to catch on to a wave that was happening. And oftentimes they end up being the ones who are forgotten because they didn't actually do anything of real substance. They sort of just capitalized on a movement. I think that at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is, and I say this in my blog, those who choose to be somebody, they may get their 15 minutes of fame in the spotlight, right? They may get that. They may get to be somebody for a short period of time, but it will probably quickly fade, right? Their light will quickly fade, as opposed to those of us who choose to do something. We actually have the potential to create work, to create memories, to inspire others to do things, to create things that in some way, shape, or form, be it the effect they have on others or the improvement they have on a particular situation or a product. Like, in those ways, we have the ability to now live on forever because we chose to do something. And that's what really matters. That's what makes an impact. Actual greatness, right? Like, actual greatness lives on forever. And that should be the goal, right? We should actually be striving to be great. And in being great means fighting for the best version of something, fighting for what you believe in, not allowing the outside world to water it down because it'll make your journey a bit easier. No, greatness means showing up with the best version of something you could have possibly produced as the best version of yourself that you could possibly have in that moment. And that doesn't mean the path to people seeing it or being inspired by it will always be easy, but it's necessary if you're truly trying to deliver people the best possible result that you can. If you're truly trying to change the world, that's what it takes. You have to fight against playing the politics and playing the game of climbing the ladder and all this, that, and third, right? Because if you are sacrificing bits of yourself, those people will only continue to elevate you as much as you choose to stroke their ego. The second you stop being that yes person they want or producing those specific results that they're looking for, they'll move on to the next person without thinking twice. It's like, yeah, you might get the notoriety and that pat on the back and that stroke of your ego that you're looking for, quickly, that quick satisfaction. But generally speaking, it will go even quicker than it came. You want something that lasts forever, something that's actually tangible, something that lives on long past your time. You have to take the time. You have to be unafraid to take the stairs. Again, look at somebody like Nip. He still found a way to be somebody, but it wasn't his priority. His priority was doing something that mattered, handling his business in a way that actually mattered, doing something for his community that actually mattered. That always came before becoming a famous rapper, before trying to have a song on the radio. And that's what you have to think about. I'm not saying that you have to go exist in the shadows and nobody ever and never get credit for the work that you do. What I'm saying is that can't be the priority. The priority first and foremost should be greatness. It should be trying to change the world in a positive way. It should be trying to leave a positive impact on this planet before you leave it. Everything else that comes after that is secondary. And that's my point. So the choice is yours. Do you want to be somebody, or do you actually want to do something? Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning into another episode. We'll be back on Thursday with our Thursday Trends episode. Again, man, we're doing the public speaking stuff. If you have a company, a school, you want me to come out and talk to you and kind of, touch the people and hopefully inspire others to do some amazing things from our community and inspire others, from our community to do some amazing things. Dramos.com. You can hit the contact tab and you can reach out to my manager and we'll set it all up. I've had some incredible experiences doing that thus far. It's something I'm trying to do a lot more here in 2022. Especially as the world begins to open up a bit more now. So, man, feel free to reach out. Let me know what you're thinking. And again, we'll catch you on Thursday. Until then, stay safe. Peace.